Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Voices of JupyterHub presentation today. Giving this presentation today, I'm Jonah Duckles. This is Beth Duckles, my sister. Our colleague Dan Sholler, unfortunately, was unable to be with us today, but we'll be talking about him a lot and the work. He was instrumental to a lot of this work. So who are we and what are we doing here? So CZ has these DEI grants a few years back, and JupyterHub and the Turing Way collaborated together to work on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the JupyterHub community. We, Beth, Dan, and Jonah, are part of a group called Organizational Mycology, and we try to marry a bit of social science inquiry skills and a little bit of tech, high-impact organizational strategy to try and help organizations be more effective. So what we're going to be presenting on today is a bit of work that we've been doing over the past year or so, where we've been helping the JupyterHub community kind of introspect and learn more about itself with an eye towards how we increase diversity, equity, and inclusion. So JupyterHub is definitely committed to community development efforts. They have ongoing activities to try and involve more people. They're encountering not unusual leadership challenges, like a lot of projects where you grow organically over time and you have a kind of a collective contributor group, and they're trying to figure out how to kind of expand that out and open it up to more people, to more participation. This is a classic thing that we've talked about a lot in the project, which is when you have a project that has no clearly defined leadership roles, there's often a who do I have to ask to get this thing done, to make something happen inside of an organization. So we encountered this a lot in our work, of people trying to understand, well, the person who did this thing last time was that person, so we should ask them. And that person is like, well, I think it should be the other person. So like this is a common pattern. I think lots of you have probably seen this this in a lot of communities. So all of this work, if you can't get enough, we've created a Voices of JupyterHub report, which is based on over 20 interviews, several months worth of work talking to people across the community. It is now today in Jupyter Book 2. So I cornered all the right people to figure out how to make it in Jupyter Book 2. This QR code will take you to that report. It's quite long. It has lots of quotes that we left out today. Beth will be covering quite a lot of quotes that we got directly from people who participate in the JupyterHub community, many of them in this room. And on every single slide, the URL is there. So if you miss the QR code, the URL is still at the bottom of every slide. We want to give you a few caveats to this work. We are outsiders. And it can be challenging to wrap your head around the kind of complexity of this kind of piece of infrastructure that people don't always see. It often enables a lot of things, but you often don't see it. And that's by design. You shouldn't see it. If you see a JupyterHub error message, something's going terribly wrong. So we only talk to people who we ethically had access to. So we didn't go around trying to find people that we couldn't kind of ethically connect with. We basically, positive experiences are a lot easier to talk about than negative experiences. And one of the goals of the grant was to improve diversity and inclusion. So we're really looking at what are the on-ramps, what are the pathways, what are the ways we can be more welcoming. And so contributor pathways depend on championing the project and actively addressing these blockers and engagement and retention kind of solutions. JupyterHub has been very successful. They've enabled a lot of things. They've enabled access. They've catalyzed innovation. They've fostered and created a positive impression and driven kind of a can-do attitude across their community and other communities that they have impact in. We think JupyterHub can be better. There's onboarding challenges. There's ways in which welcoming people and getting them started up and involved into contributing could be improved. JupyterHub exists in a very complex environment. So we heard this morning from Jason talking about, seeing the graph of how Jupyter overall contribution has kind of plateaued, and he wants to kind of increase it. So hopefully some of this, if you're not part of JupyterHub, you can see parallels where this work can apply in your Jupyter projects or in your other work. Attracting new contributors, avoiding burnout, and intentional collective leadership structures are needed. You don't always have to appoint someone who's the El Supremo of a project. You can find ways to have patterns and scaffolding, so we'll talk a bit more about that. What's not in the report is that everyone has multiple responsibilities and roles. There are uncomfortable incidents and conversations in the organizational history. There is no difference between perceived injustice, mistreatment, and actual injustice and mistreatment. My colleague Dan is very big on this kind of point, which is that if you perceive that you've been wronged in any community, there's no difference between that and you actually being wronged. And having those conversations about those kinds of things takes vulnerability and takes work. So some of that has come out in this particular project. Community norms are better than policies. So policies can still be very important, and they can be good to kind of connect with and point to, but community norms are definitely better. And on the bright side, Beth is going to talk a lot about this. Jupyter has many ways forward. They can take pride in the project that they've worked on. There's many possibilities enumerated here. I won't go into every one of them because Beth's about to do that.
Thank you. So we think that there's a lot to be shared here and a lot that the Jupyter community can take from this. And so one of the key pieces is about celebrating JupyterHub. We want to encourage that celebration and that conversation. Part of what I think happens a lot of times with organizations that have a utility function is that we don't always talk about them. We don't talk about the electricity as easily because we just turn it on and off, and when it's off, that's when we're upset about it. So how can we tell these stories about things that are under the radar and talk about what makes it so useful? And in many ways, when we talk about how to celebrate the JupyterHub system, we're also talking about the entire Jupyter system. And actually being here at JupyterCon and listening to a lot of the discussions has been really impactful to talk about and celebrate. In this next section, I'm going to be going through a lot of quotes. I'm not going to read them all out loud, just as an FYI, because there's a lot of them. And we have even more quotes. We are social scientists by training, so we really love to share the voices here. Please check out the PDF, and our goal is really to summarize the voices and give you a sense of what we heard. But we had so much good information that we had to take out of this. But one of the key attributes that we found was the success of JupyterHub is the ability to empower people. And we heard this over and over again. This was a widespread theme. The project touches many different people, and it's a project that is used and used widely, as we've heard over and over again in JupyterCon. Great variety of people using them: universities, research labs, online communities, companies, public authorities. And it's really impressive, and most of our respondents talked about how many people rely on and use JupyterHub. This empowerment enables people to think interactively about data, the world around them, about a computational question, about an algorithm, and to do that work openly, collaboratively, and to share the results of their work. This is not a surprise to any of you, I'm sure, as you've been listening to all these talks, but this real empowerment of different types of communities is something we heard multiple times. We also heard, and actually I was in the room with 2 previous discussions about the educational system, so this is a key way that JupyterHub makes an impact as being a driver for improving education. What's fun is to see that it's outside even just JupyterHub, but the specific impact of JupyterHub is in particular not having to install a Python stack on everybody's laptop when you're trying to teach data science methods. And in this sense, JupyterHub is incredibly influential in that, really taking away a certain pain point in classrooms, and we've seen multiple spaces where that's been impactful. Also, this quote, when you zoom out and focus on the intended use, that being the students that are going to leverage this means you're focusing on the educational specifically. So you're working on the site at which the education happens instead of working through and troubleshooting installation problems on computers. We heard about a number of different types of students who are using JupyterHubs, from CS classes to also psychology classes and how to program classes. So as Rick puts it, some folks may end up becoming therapists or psychiatrists and have used Jupyter. Kind of cool. We heard that these endeavors were starting to branch out as well, so the I-Corps program for community colleges that can't afford a tech team. And we heard a lot that this was evening the playing field, that this was making it available to multiple groups that wouldn't otherwise have that. So trying to find more actionable ways to do that. In addition to having an educational impact, we see a strength in JupyterHub in enabling scientific innovation. And we already heard yesterday from yesterday from the Nobel Prize winners, and we've been hearing this a lot. What are the impacts that we're seeing that enable scientific innovation? And we know that people have used this for the IPCC, for the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. We've also seen it at NASA, making sure that solutions are things that they can afford. That's another piece as well, making it affordable and capable to be used. And this innovation is able to then compete with Azure notebooks and to run hubs at a fraction of the cost. So reducing these computing costs is a real benefit and something we see as a value add for JupyterHub and accessibility of computing. And specifically because this community and the innovations haven't been primarily focused on the code or just focused on the code, but also looking at the inclusivity and the need to look at the wide variety of contributions that are a part of it. There's a sense of success in part because of this openness. So not everything is about the code, even though that we know that's fundamental. Without that attitude, I don't think Jupyter as a whole would have succeeded as far if it wasn't, if it was all strictly about the code. We heard again and again that this community was about the people, about access, about doing things in an inclusive manner. And we heard this from multiple folks. These are just some examples of where we heard it. We realized that there was a sense of inclusion that people felt when interacting with one another, wanting to encourage, to welcome, to support, and make a contribution. So Georgiana says, and I felt that people were very, very welcoming and supporting, and they were answering questions in such a way that I felt encouraged to continue. You see this here at JupyterCon as well, this encouragement, this let me introduce you to another person, this welcoming. We also heard about the use of the team compass and the desire to have a space where the structure of the subproject was explained so that we knew what the roles were. We can see that some work in that may be needed, but also there's a sense of trying to have a discussion about these pathways. We also heard that one of the key attributes of this community was the way that the leadership pulled in newcomers to work on the project. So there's a story about Fernando pulling in Carol, one of the contributors, and it was just so gracious that as a woman in science or tech, oftentimes that doesn't happen. So it was a really nice impact on me, and we got to chatting about how I was using the notebook. This inclusion, or this conscious decision to include people, is a key part of what has made this move forward, and it makes a difference in the welcome that people receive in coming into the community, and it's an important aspect. And in a lot of ways, the ability to see in another person, see one another in person was a key attribute of this as well. So this is another piece where one of the respondents was talking about spending time and talking through things, much like what we're doing here at JupyterCon. So the ability to talk with one another, be in person, it makes a difference. And of course, this is a challenge because it brings up the question of scaling. How easy is it to scale personal discussions and conversations? But this individual request to contribute, the, hey, let me shoulder tap this person and say, hey, I'd really love to see you contribute, you personally speaking to each individual, I think is a key part of what makes open source and open science work. Saying to one person, Ariel, I would love it if you'd help. Ariel does a lot of help, so I shouldn't be just focusing on you. We also heard that this engagement led people to develop their careers. And this is, I think, a really fun and kind of helpful finding for a lot of folks. Why do people contribute to open source? In part because it helps their careers. We heard folks saying that this kept them on the forefront of technology because of the work they were doing. They were doing something exciting that helped them. And we also got this sense of people being hooked or pouring their efforts into the work that they were doing. They were excited by it. They were moving forward. So I just got convinced that I wanted that internship and get involved so much. I just poured all my efforts into JupyterHub only. This sense of really being engaged and being a part of something. And I think what is helpful also is that this does establish credibility. And for those folks who are students, for example, or coming into a community or trying to, try something new, this can establish a credibility in a field and start to move people into having more of a sense of themselves as contributing. And in particular, a kind of cachet or social capital that comes from being a part of a project. So even when folks step back from the project and are no longer contributing, they still contributed and it's still a part of them. So if we see that plateau that we were looking at this morning, that plateau doesn't necessarily include that those people who contributed before are still talking about Jupyter and the Jupyter ecosystem in the future work that they're doing. So the benefit of it is actually more. So this is helpful because I think it gives us also a sense for why folks want to contribute, because this is both an inclusive place to contribute, but also a place where the name kind of tracks. People also in the project feel the impact as well, knowing they're having an impact for other people in their lives, and this gives an infrastructure for people to do their research and analysis. So just a recap of what we heard, the impact in education and research is core here to what we're talking about. We also saw a commitment to this research and education, which means there's very much a fostered mission-driven culture, and I think the mission that we've heard is reflected here. Leaders' one-on-one engagement with newcomers has been really beneficial, but this can be difficult to scale. Leaders can't always go around tapping one person on the shoulder and saying, could you help me? But we could do that more. More members of the community could ask for specific things. Participation in JupyterHub has been beneficial to individuals' careers, and when people leave or step back, they usually continue to do amazing things, and that carries on the Jupyter name.
So what's in JupyterHub's future? There's a few things we'll talk about here. So they can take pride in the project and the stories that they've had so far. They can recognize that JupyterHub is a model sub-project. And what all of this is about taking what we learned and what we knew about all the amazing contributors to JupyterHub and saying, what do we want to be now that we have a different understanding and a different introspection of ourselves? We can develop more unified voice and enhance communication, start trying to build structures and ways that we engage and invite people actually shoulder tapping. Ariel and I in the break were having a conversation with some students, and I said, have you made a contribution to Jupyter before? Have you ever submitted something as an issue or a pull request? They said no. And I said, why haven't you? And they said, I don't know. And I said, well, the next time you think about doing it, can you just think of this conversation and think you are invited to? And so I think we all have a role in that in this room and beyond in the entire conference of telling people you are invited to kind of contribute to this place, and we need more perspectives. Having frank conversations about technical and organizational debt, and is technical and organizational debt creating situations where it's harder to invite people in, and talking about how we might get through that. Making commitments to diversity and community health, getting in a strategic mindset and thinking about roadmaps and goals and things like that, and building organizational capacity. So really thinking about the humans that we want to have the capacity to do the particular types of activities that are going to unlock the potential. And I think this applies to all kinds of different groups. So we've been doing this work for the last 18 months. Our kind of effort and our engagement will kind of culminate in this event that we're calling Hub Dash, which is a kind of a riff on the Turing Way's Book Dash that they do. But this will be a 2-day event in December where we're going to invite JupyterHub users and contributors to help us think about the documentation and front door and ways in which all of that can set JupyterHub up for the future. It'll be a 2-day event online in European and North American time zones. If you're interested in it, this QR code and that URL, you can apply to join us and be in the kind of coordination communication streams for that. Your sub-project, I've kind of talked about this, or other activity can learn from a lot of these models and things. You can talk about how you celebrate and take pride in your own projects and people. Go thank someone today if you haven't in your project. Gratitude goes a long way for your own kind of effort and for other people. What does your sub-project do well relative to others? How can Jupyter as a whole improve onboarding and offboarding? We heard Jason talking about that today. How can we get that upswing in the contributor graph? Can we do that today before lunch is over, that we all go out and invite more people to contribute, and really say that we'll be there to help them do that? What are the commitments your group wants to make to diversity and community health, and how can your sub-project build organizational capacity? So we want to just thank you for your time. We are this group, Organizational Mycology. We do this kind of work with a lot of open source and open science projects. If you're interested in learning more, please reach out and contact us. And I just wanted to leave the Hub Dash stuff up at the end as well, just to keep inviting people to participate.
You're all invited to Hub Dash if you didn't catch that. So please join in if you would like to come. We would love to have you. And thank you so much. We really appreciate it.